So these are like two blocks of the same size. They're about 20 by 20 by 100 millimeters that I'm going to use to level the Z-bar. This bar has to be level before you actually level the bed. See, right now it's almost perfectly level. They tell you to use this acrylic stick that came with the printer, but I find that it's a little difficult. I find out that if you cut off the power and the motors are not engaged, usually since this side is heavier, it's going to actually drop. There's a possibility that it's going to drop even more. So I find that it's easier just to print this, print these two bars and put one on each side, and then do the leveling that way. If you look at the rear of the printer, on the side there are two stepper motors, one here and one here, and there are these two clamps on top that you're supposed to hold one side and then turn the other. Depending on which direction you turn it, it's supposed to adjust it up and down. But that works only if it's slightly misaligned. This bar is slightly misaligned. The way I did it is actually I unclamped the two screws. I think it'll be better if I just showed you. See how this goes up and down the clamp, and same thing on the right side. See how it goes up and down? These two go up and down. I'm not sure if you can see it. If you look how on the inside, there's a smaller gap. See, if you look at the hole right here, it's a smaller hole, and then inside the middle right here, the hole is actually smaller. If you take a look, here's the actual motor, part of the motor that comes out, and then if you look, you see how if you raise it up, so the rod is actually not resting on the motor itself, it's actually resting on the inside of the, I mean, depending on how deep you put the rod down, it actually rests on top of the mid part of this clamp right here. So if you were to raise it up right here, you see there's it stops without the rod actually protruding all the way to the bottom. So I actually took the rod out completely on this side. On the one where it has the actual extruder, I left it intact. This is loose. This is loose also. This left rod I took out. Without taking out the rod on this side, I found out I had difficulty trying to lower the Z bar because it was just too perfectly tightly fit. Keep lowering it until until this the Z bar actually rests on the two rods. Then, hold on, let me just tighten this inside screw a little bit. Okay. Now I'm just gonna thread this side in. Okay. And then I'm gonna make sure to go to take a look on the rods on the other side and to make sure that it's still resting on the Z bar is actually resting on the two rods. Make sure the top of the rods are in. See, right now, if you look, when I turn the clamp, it actually doesn't engage the spiral rod. So I'm gonna just put some pressure on here, and you don't have to put a lot of pressure. Just lift it to the level of the rod itself. The bottom, remember the middle part right here where it's supposed to hold the rod. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and tighten the clamp. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the one on the left side or the right side, depending on how you want to look at it. And then again, see how it still goes up, now it goes up and down. And then make sure it almost wants to come to its own level. Now I'm just going to raise it up. let me just show you what's going on. This is just to show you that it was done correctly. Hold on. I'll just home. I can tell the leveling sensor has to be adjusted. If you take a look right now, hold on. If I were to raise it up, put these two rods, 1 millimeter, and if I were to lower it, you see the gap. It's like almost perfect. They're all perfect. There is no gap whatsoever. These are at the same level. This bar is at the same level. And if I were to disengage the printer, the power, the motor, and there is no power actually going to the stepper motor to engage it. It's still stable and it doesn't drop down. So basically, this is how I level the Z bar axis. If you look on the left side of the printer head, there's actually 2 screws right here. Those 2 screws will actually release the sensor. I'm going to loosen these 2 screws and get the leveling sensor in position. I'm going to get this bed to temperature, which is about 60 degrees. You don't have to preheat the nozzle, but I just noticed that my nozzle has a little bit of plastic on the bottom, so I'm going to get rid of that before I actually level the leveling sensor. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the leveling. And here's your 0.2 millimeter. Okay, and you're going to put this acrylic piece right below the sensor, and you're going to lower it until the nozzle actually hits the 0.2 millimeter, the thickness gauge. What you're looking for is a little resistance when you move the thickness gauge. If you don't feel that resistance, you want to lower the nozzle a little bit. If you feel too much resistance, you want to actually raise the nozzle. You're going to lower and raise the nozzle and fine-tune the process. Okay, when you feel slight resistance on the thickness gauge, then you're pretty much set. You see how I can raise and lower the sensor? Okay, I want to have it flat on the acrylic, the little base. Then when it's flat on the surface, resting on the actual acrylic, then I want to just go ahead and tighten the screws on the side, which will hold that sensor in place. Once it's tightened, you see there's no I mean, don't pull it really hard, but just do it slightly. You don't even have to do it slightly. Once you tighten it, it'll be in place. So you want to remove the acrylic, and then you want to actually adjust this little screw right here, and you want to turn it counterclockwise until the light turns off. You see how the light turns off? That means it's not detecting the bed anymore. So you're actually adjusting the height of the sensor to the level of the bed. So I'm going to turn it clockwise very slowly until the light turns on. You see how the light turns on? And then I'm going to turn it to the left a little bit. And then again I'm going to re-engage it, turning it clockwise. So right when it engages, that's where you want to set the level, the adjustment to. You see, if I put a little pressure on the bed, how the light turns off. Now that it's complete, I'm going to do the auxiliary leveling. Right now I'm using the Tiny Machines firmware. That's the reason why it's homing to the left bottom corner. I just updated my firmware. And if you're using the Creality firmware, it's going to home into the center of the bed. What I'm doing is now I'm adjusting the bed, manually adjusting the bed with the knobs on the bottom and the feeler gauge. This is the same process that you were doing for the sensor adjustment. You're looking for that small resistance on the nozzle to the bed. We're going to go to the 2, 3, 4, 5 points and then going to the number 1 last. Now you can do the auto leveling. After everything checks out, you can use the auto level. The normal auto level has 16 points, but this one has, I upgraded the firmware with the tiny machine, and it has 25 points. And that's the correct way to level your bed. And it's complete. And these are the adjustment numbers.